Jesus, I crave to know you, just to know you will satisfy my soul.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. This is episode number 194. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me on this episode. So I appreciate your patience waiting for this episode to release. So thanks for joining me on it, and we'll just jump right into it. So I was listening to some scripture, and I was struck by just a little word that I noticed within the text, and that's kind of what I want to center around today. Pass on some of what I was struck by, leave you with some thoughts on it, and to possibly chew on it yourself a little more. So it's going to be found in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 31. Now, you may be very familiar with this passage, but it says, Paul's writing here, so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all to the glory of God. And it's just a very simple verse. There's kind of some backstory to this portion of Scripture. Paul's trying to elaborate on the believer's freedom, talking about foods that believers can partake of, and just kind of some parameters for consideration. But just kind of jumping into the verse, as I was listening to this, there's one tiny word that struck me, and it's the word "to." So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all to the glory of God. Now, depending on your translation, it may be a different word there. You may see "do it all for the glory of God." So it just depends on which translation, perhaps. And the reason for that is this word is, to or for. These are prepositions, and they can be rendered different ways to make the sentence make more sense, or to portray the meaning that it's trying to get across. So the different translations may render it differently for the intended purposes that they're trying to accomplish, as they feel best embodies the text. So you can get some variations there, but that was the word, to the glory of God. And it struck me that there was something there. It kind of caught me in my tracks, and I just got caught in that moment. And so as I began to ponder on what was there, I didn't quite see it, but I felt that there was something to discover. And so as I stayed in there and thought on the text and listened to it multiple times, some revelation began to come regarding something that I was able to draw from this particular text. And as I asked the Lord, what is it that you want me to see in this? I was then reminded of, I had to look it up, but it was Matthew 25, and it's verse number 40. And Jesus is speaking here. He's speaking of the sheep and goats. But in verse 40 of Matthew 25, he says, "The king will reply, 'Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it to me.'" And again, you may see it rendered differently in your translation. You did it for me. But here we see that preposition again. You did it to me. So, what am I gathering from this? Well, I'll tell you what I traditionally thought when I read this passage in 1 Corinthians, and what I felt that Paul was trying to get across. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God, or to the glory of God. It was I processed that verse to kind of embody this: whatever you're doing, do it unto the Lord, as more so as kind of an intention or an intangible thing, that you're doing something with the, I guess, expectation of the Lord's approval or the Lord's pleasure in it. But it was very much, in my mind, a thinking of something kind of intangible, an intention, a motive that you were doing things in, because you were doing it to the Lord, more so unto Him, as though it was an offering, so to speak. Or you could kind of parallel it like you were doing something, trying to embody His character in it. And that's perfectly reasonable position to hold. But I think this is what I felt that the Lord was showing me uniquely, that I have not seen before. And He connected it to the Matthew 25 portion. And I think that's where the difference comes. Remember, it says in Matthew 25:40, the king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for me, or rather, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did to me. Now, to understand what He's saying there, Jesus is telling them that, when I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. So there's all these tangible expressions of affecting a physical realm, a earthly reality. There is an expression of that. There's a physical need, and that physical need is met in whatever way. And so Jesus there says, you did all those things, and you did it to me. And keeping that same to the glory of God, it's very easy to think, when we think of to the glory of God, we think of it as this kind of spiritual, far off reality that's disconnected from the physical. But what I believe that God was trying to show me and remind me, and I hope I am showing you, is with that phrase, whatever you do, all the things that you do in your life, whether you're eating or drinking or whatever it is, do it all to the glory of God. The physical realm that you're in and operating in is physically touching, physically impacting the glory of God. It's not just my actions are demonstrating the majesty of God, but the things that we do are physically impacting the glory of God. It's not a physical versus spiritual interaction. It's a physical to physical. Now, we can't necessarily see the glory of God, except in God's created order. We can see His glory through the wonders that He created, but we don't just really walk around, seeing His manifested glory, and so it's hard for us to process what the glory of God would look like, or how we even could behold it. So it's a challenging thing to consider. It's a concept that's very foreign to us in many ways. And so when we think of whatever you do it to the glory of God, we very much often think of, at least I have, this as to mean some sort of physical thing impacting a spiritual truth or a spiritual reality. But I think that the Lord was calling me to come to an awareness that the physical realm, the physical things that we do are impacting, are touching physically the glory of God. And so, do I know exactly what that means? No, I don't, but I want to. And so, this is more an invitation, I guess, to come to an awareness, for one, of this reality, but then it's also a beckoning to come deeper into the realization, and by God's grace, discover what that can mean. And so, I know, myself, I'm eager to enter into discover what does this mean and what could it mean. And so I would invite you as well. How can all that I do in the physical world, what impact can that have to the physical glory of God? And how can I partner with God to better both represent His glory, but also to more appropriately interact with His glory, to more appropriately touch, not in a to bring it unto myself. Don't hear that, but touching as in interacting with, impacting it in some way. And so I guess that's what I would like to leave with you on this particular episode. Just a invitation to process that, to seek from the Lord what that could look like and what it could mean. I would love to get your feedback on how that maybe has impacted you, and in the future how you process that and what that means to you. So I appreciate you taking the time to join me. Thanks for your patience for this episode, and I look forward to the next one. God bless.
I would trade 1,000,000 lifetimes for a moment here with you.